Hi everyone, James here from F9, and these are my top 10 tips for kick drums. Number one is the most important. Always pick your kick drums by ear. Don't worry about what it says on the file name. Don't worry about what folder it's in or whether it's even supposed to be for a different genre. Listen to it. Is it going to be right for your track? You can make that decision. Now, I've noticed there's a worrying trend of people starting to produce by theory, or even looking at the waveforms and deciding whether they want to use it or not. We do not experience music with our eyes. We only ever experience music with our ears. So please concentrate on those two amazing things that you've got either side of your head. Make the decisions from there. Now, also, don't ever be afraid to stop production for a little bit and actually change your kick drum to see if you can improve it. There's a weird psychological function. It's a bit like a reinforcement that because we've done something and we've made a decision and we were happy about that decision, we sometimes tend to cling on to it. Now, I've been guilty of this, and particularly with kick drums, there have been times when I've gotten to the end of the track and then gone, oh, do you know what? I've known for ages that kick isn't right. I'm just actually now going to knuckle down and swap it out. I would have saved myself probably days of pain just changing the kick drum. Some kick drums just have magic. Other kick drums will work in some tracks and not the others. Every single track is as unique as a fingerprint, and that's because of the amount of information that is carried in the bottom end. So please always remember, there is no magic bullet to get a really tight and powerful bass end on any track. Every single one is different, and anyone telling you that there is one method that you can use that will solve it all has not made enough tracks. Number two, concentrate your efforts immediately on the length of the kick drum. You want to shorten it almost as much as you possibly can. We've got used to these huge, great big long tails on modern kicks, but they're just going to get in the way. But let me just also give you a reference point. Beneath that big kick now, I've just opened up two hidden tracks. This one here contains a Linn drum kick and this one a DMX kick. Both were used heavily in dance music during the 80s. Look at the length of them. They're absolutely tiny compared to all of the modern kicks. Now, if you go and have a look at styles of music like hip-hop and drum and bass that use an awful lot of huge subs and droning basses, you'll find that the kicks are massively, massively short. That is to allow for all of the bass information to get through. I've mentioned this to quite a few people over email just recently, and one guy emailed back and said, this is the best piece of advice I've ever been given on bass end. So if you want a yardstick, well, how about for a 4/4 track, keeping the length of the kick to about 1/8? Start there, but also see if you can pull it back. Your bass sound will be providing the bass. The kick is there to provide that punch of rhythm. So the more room that you can give your bass lines, the warmer your bass end and more interesting it's going to be. So don't let these kick drums take up all of this room. Keep them shorter and tighter, and I promise you'll find all of this easier. Number three, balance your kick drum as soon as you possibly can. That will help you create a useful gain structure for your entire production. Nearly all sample packs use fully normalized drums, and you can run into real problems if you use them without changing the levels. Everything will start clipping very early. Now, there's one point I really want to hammer home in as many videos as I possibly can. The most useful part of an audio fader is around 0 dB. Let me show you why. I've got it at 0 at the moment. Now I'm going to double click on it and type -6. Look at the amount the fader moves. It's a long old way, but if I bring this all the way down, let's actually just go to -20. And now I take that down by a further 6 dB, so -26. Look at the distance it moves. It's absolutely minute. So that tiny amount down there is about 6 dB. So as you can see, you've got far more resolution at around 0. And this is all because of the non-linear response of audio, and something to really get your head around. So if you can actually create a balance where your faders are around 0, all of your life will be simpler when you come to mix. Also, leave yourself with as much flexibility as you possibly can. One thing I would always suggest is never automate fader values whilst you're actually producing or in the early stages of mixing, because you may need to rebalance everything. So many modern plugins have output gain controls that you can automate instead if you want to do level moves. But keeping your fader automation off means that you can grab everything at any point and rebalance. Vitally important. In the F9 kick release, we duplicated all the normalized folders and dropped everything by 6 dB. So if you use these samples, you'll automatically start building in some headroom. And it's so vitally important. Now, do remember, kick drums and bass end take up the most energy, and they are some of the most fundamental parts of your production. My dad was a builder, and I've always been slightly fascinated with construction. Just up the road from me at the studio, they're building a new hotel complex, and I'm fascinated by the amount of time that they're spending on the groundwork. It seems to be going on forever, and I know the rest of it will fly up from there. But you ask any good builder, engineer, architect, they'll always say the same thing. If you start from great foundations, you can't lose. It's exactly the same with production. Get this bit right, and every single production decision that you make on top will become easier. Number 4, take regular breaks. Now, this is so important with the bass end. If you expose yourself to loud music over a long period of time, the brain will actually start to find a new equilibrium and change your perceived frequency response. With modern music that's so hyped towards bass and treble, this effect can be quite dramatic. Now, I found out many years ago that if I were to take a break and just walk about, the brain resets quite quickly. The noise of traffic seems to really help for some reason. I would then go back and discover the bass end to be miles better than I thought it was when I left. Often, the most useful control in your studio is your DAW stop button. Number 5, try using dynamic EQ on kicks. This has been absolutely revelatory for me. Here I've got one of the demos that I put together for F9 Analog 808s. And I want to boost a little bit here in the bottom and also have a wideband boost at the top. But instead of using them just as static filters or static EQ moves, I'm going to make them dynamic. So in Pro Q, I'm just going to right click on it, make dynamic, and then I can control how much that little bass curve is going to push up. And this threshold slider that is available on Pro Q will allow me to determine the level at which the EQ starts to work. And most importantly, when it starts to fade out. Watch this. It's really adding punch, but I find this doesn't swamp the bass end like a static EQ move does. It's almost like our ears hear the transient first. Okay, that's a kick drum, and then it's on to the next bit. It gives more time for the bass to come through. So if you've got any kind of EQ that will work dynamically, do give this a go. Now, on that point, transient processors are all the rage, and they can be absolutely vital for modern drum production. My favourite is this one. It's the Oxford Envolution. This is not a cheap plugin, but do keep your eye on Sonics if you're interested in it, because every now and again they have major sales. I always find just about a dB or something like that, a little bit of hold and a fairly slow release. It just helps punch that transient through of the kick. And also because you're not increasing the tail length or the tail size, you're leaving more room for all that lovely bass to come on underneath it. Okay, this one's an absolute cracker. Be careful how you use overdrive and distortion effects. So I've got a kick drum here just at the top, and I've deliberately high-pass filtered it so that we're going to clear out an awful lot of the sub, and we're going to monitor everything on the FabFilter Pro Q. As you can see, not much information there between 50 and 20. It's starting to dive off. And there's the curve. It's bottoming out at 20 Hertz. Now look what happens when I apply this overdrive effect to it. That is a serious amount of subsonic, and where we were losing it at about 20 Hertz here, it's going all the way down to 12. This will happen with nearly every single type of distortion and overdrive, so just be mindful of it. You're probably always going to want to follow that with a high-pass filter to keep everything else under control. Now, this will happen to anything that you distort in a production, whether that be a kick drum, bass, synths, pianos, all of that kind of stuff. So you've really got to go through, if you're into your distortions, and they are a very, very important tool in modern mixing, to go through and clean up all of the signals afterwards, because you could be unknowingly throwing huge amounts of sub-information into the bottom end that is just going to confuse things. So clear it all up. Your kick drums will love you for it. Here's something I bet quite a few of you didn't know. The moment you do something like apply a high-pass filter or use a large peaking or shelving EQ, you will actually change the phase of the signal that you're processing. Now, phase is a big subject, and I'm going to do a completely separate video all about it. But just to say, in the very bottom octaves, phase is absolutely king. So when you start heavily EQing, you will be inducing phase shifts into those audio chains. This is because nearly all EQs use delays to do their job. Inside an analog EQ, you're going to find the capacitors and the inductors doing this, and inside digital systems, it's delay lines. And as I will explain in the separate video, phase is a function of time, and it gets very dramatic when you get down to these lower octaves. So that means if you start doing serious EQ moves on your kick drum, you will actually be changing the phase of the signal. Now, don't panic, it's just something to be aware of. One thing I would suggest as a little working practice, every now and again, flip the phase of either your kick drum or your bass line by 180 degrees and just see if it makes a positive difference. Now, we can use this knowledge to our advantage as well. Say you're halfway through a mix and you feel that it's a little bass light and you want to add some. Now, you may want to go straight to the bass channel or the kick, but what you could do is go straight to the master fader and apply some EQ. Now, this is slightly advantageous because it means the phase shift will happen to the entire track. Now, also, it means you can tickle a nice little bit of top end afterwards to perhaps compensate for the extra bass you've added. Now, a few of you might quite rightly ask, what about linear phase EQs? Now, this is only available inside of digital EQing, and it basically uses a very clever trick. I'm going to switch Pro Q3 over to linear phase and turn this up to very high. Linear phase EQs basically dump a massive amount of latency onto the system, which can be problematic in its own right, but that latency will cover any amount of delays that are created by the EQ filters. Now, there is one problem with that. The frequencies can actually get smeared, and that can cause what's known as pre-ringing. I'm going to go for quite an extreme example here while I play a kick drum back and shift up and down, first with nothing on. Sure, you can hear that. It's almost like there's a little reverse kick being thrown in there as well. This is the pre-ringing effect, and it happens to all linear phase EQs. To illustrate this problem, I've bounced two versions of this kick drum down. One with the EQ in standard mode, the other, look at the difference, in linear phase. You see that whoomp up into the kick drum. Now, this is quite an extreme example shown here, but obviously you may not want anything like that floating around on your bass end, and it's one of the reasons why I tend to generally keep away from linear phase EQs. Number 8, make sure you have a monitoring system capable of actually delivering sub. Now, this sounds simple, but it's a major gotcha for most people due to technical issues you may not be aware of. Here's the frequency response and specs for my beloved main monitors, which are Event Opals. The lowest frequency given as part of the official spec is 35 Hz. However, you must understand something about tech specs and the physics of speaker design. Legally, manufacturers are allowed a -3 dB drop before stating the lowest or highest part of a frequency response. Speakers have to work in cabinets, and all cabinet designs work as physical high-pass filters. So quite often, the response drops off very sharply indeed underneath the lowest frequency given on the spec. You can see this on my Opal's response curve. Go check your monitor's specs and then pull up a current production. Now place a -3 dB shelving EQ at that given frequency point on your master bus and a 24 dB per octave high-pass filter 15 Hz lower. Now turn the EQ on and off. I bet you that's quite a difference. This is what your monitors are doing to your audio. There is a well-used axiom of truth in computing. Garbage in equals garbage out. In other words, if you put flawed information into a system, you will get bad results. And that works through our brains and our hearing too. Modern audio now deals with incredibly low frequencies, and this is obviously heightened for music heading to club systems. If you want to really compete in the ever-increasing sphere of producers, you must have a playback system that's capable of generating these subsonics. You cannot do this with really small boxed monitors. It's physically impossible. When I was much younger, I would wonder why sometimes my mixes sounded choked, and it was because they were dealing with subsonics that the speakers simply couldn't reproduce. Solutions? Well, physically bigger speakers can reproduce much lower frequencies, and in monitoring you really do get what you pay for, but that might simply not be practical. You could add a sub-speaker, but the same rules apply. You'll need a really big one to get the very lowest tones, and I find sometimes that they can feel disconnected. My solution over the years has been to use headphones. Now, if you look at the specs of most headphones, they go way lower than most monitors for a fraction of the cost. They also operate in a controlled acoustic environment due to their design and sidestep pesky standing waves that will cause havoc in your room's bass response. These are my current headphones, Focal Clear MG Pros. They are not cheap at all, but it's my job to deliver you guys the very best sounds, and they have proven an immensely valuable purchase for working on the bottom octaves. If I were to replicate their quality of reproduction at the lowest frequencies, it would cost probably between £10,000 and £15,000 in this room. Now, you don't have to go crazy. Just find a decent pair of headphones with a great response and a sound that you like, and see if they help you judge what's really going on in the bottom end of your production. But don't solely use them. You cannot really completely mix on headphones. Always use a mixture of headphones and your monitors. Number 9, be careful of complex bussing or subgrouping plots. Now, I know some producers who compress and EQ every single one of their channels, then group, say, the kick and the snares into a bus, then pile that bus into another bus with the rest of the drums and effects, and then funnel all of the results into the master bus, with dynamics processing at every single stage. Now, this way of working is immensely complex to control and requires real skill, experience, and discipline to get working. When you have multiple compressors effectively in series like this, the potential for the different attack and release responses and timing settings to cause artifacts and play havoc with your transients is large. I've learned over the years to work much harder on the individual sounds as well as their balance, and only use subgrouping if absolutely needed. Now, I was taught this by Kevin Granger at Wired Masters. He's one of the best mix engineers that I've ever come across, and I have to say it made my work and my producing life 100% better and technically easier. Number 10, stop keying your kick drums. This whole theory is terribly flawed due to the complexities of subsonic phase interactions. It's quite a big subject, so I've recorded a couple of videos now about it, so please do watch them. But take it from me, once you let go of this flawed piece of information, you'll be so much happier. Fine and coarse tuning of kicks is really important, but precise keying to your track's root can actually be really dangerous. Now, this takes us right back to the first point. Trust your ears over your eyes or any theory that you've picked up from forums and YouTube. Thank you so much for watching. A lot of this was learned making F9's kick, and I hope it's really been of use to you. All the very best from us. We'll see you next time.